days. Well, sometimes we don't make it. Like the other day when I went under the knife, I shared with you guys yesterday, day before yesterday, I had spine surgery. So I wanted to start out the show before we get into it. Just warning: if you see me get up, and I've got a great guest. We've told you that Bishop T.D. Jakes is here with us today. It's going to be a little different kind of show. But if sitting is starting to turn my eyes into little pencils or something because I hit that pain thing, I'm going to get up, walk around for a second, turn over him, but I think I'm going to be okay. All right, so enough of that noise. If you are a first-time listener, normally this is a call-in show. Today we're not going to do calls because we're going to have a great conversation with one of the great spiritual and just societal leaders that we've had for a long time, Bishop T.D. Jakes. He's written a new book, and I've asked him to come on and share a little bit about that and just share a lot about, just life. I've spoken at conferences where the bishop was speaking several times, and I'm telling you guys, there's lots of smart people out there. There are less wise people, and the times that I've been privileged to hear him, I've just sat there and just kind of soaked up the wisdom, and I think you're going to get a chance to do that today. So I'm really, really glad that he has joined us, and we're going to go to him in just a second. One quick announcement: we do have the marriage webinar coming up on May 19th. So don't forget that if you haven't signed up. It's called The Marriage Equation. And I named it that because, equations are equations. Some things are going to equal some things. And there are ways to do marriage that equal good outcomes. And there are definitely ways to do it that don't equal good outcomes. So we're going to get into those arenas. And I'm going to go very specific in three big areas. One is, if you're kind of at the pain is so bad that you're going to call it quits, you think it's over, you don't know a way out. There's going to be marriages that are in that place. There's a middle one where a lot of people are. Their marriage is going to make it. They're okay, but there's a recurring issue or pain point that you keep finding yourself in. Cycle back through, or some wall that you've hit, or some way that you're stuck. We're going to address that. And then there's a bunch of people that they're doing fine, but they want to do better. Every great athlete has some way that they're working on their game, and every great business person does that. And so great marriages always want to get better as well. So that is May 19th, and you can sign up by going to boundaries.me/marriage. That's the website, boundaries.me/marriage. Okay, so let's hop into the real reason that I'm here today. That's because I want to learn from the bishop. So Bishop, welcome to the program. So glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see you again, and to be back with you is a great pleasure.
Well, tell me now. We're going to hop into this book. Why don't you tell everybody? It's called "Don't Drop the Mic," right?
Yes.
Now, did you write that because you have a tendency to drop the mic? I've never seen you drop the mic. No. You hold on to it when I've seen you. What does don't drop the mic mean?
The bottom line is the power of your words can change the world. And at a time in our society where people are buying out pistols, nearing revolt, it is important to recognize that most of the transformative moments in our history occurred because of a man and a mic, not a man and a gun.
Wow.
I think it is important in international negotiations, when talks end, bombs begin. The mic is so important that we do not drop it nationally, internationally, interpersonally, and professionally. That I felt it was incumbent upon me to talk to first clergy about ways in which we can extrapolate from the text more relevant materials and find great diversity. And then the pandemic hit, and then the racial violence broke out. And so the book kind of morphed into a much bigger conversation than how to preach. It went into how to live and how to survive and how to coexist on a planet with people who have varying ideas, not
Yeah.
losing sight of who you are, but accommodating the diversity that comes with our partnership on the planet.
Yeah. That line right there, not losing who you are and accommodating at the same time. We get a lot of calls on this program because this is the audience here is really geared towards kind of personal life, how we do. There aren't a lot of people that are platform speakers like you are, or negotiating big international deals. But you said a moment ago that this goes down to the interpersonal level.
Right.
And we have had so many calls, Bishop, in the last year of families that can't get together anymore.
Right.
Extended families where, we went through, we went through last 4th of July, and then you went through Labor Day and Easter and all these holidays, and families literally could not be in the same room because they couldn't talk to each other about these issues. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think that it's good to look at the family gathering as if it were an international summit.
do you mean we need like armies protecting?
No, I mean, we have to do our homework. I mean that we have to be sensitive to the fact that we're related, but that does not mean that we have the same generational views, the same experiences. Our gender affects it, our age affects it, our journey affects the way we talk. And I'm talking about the survival of a family. I've been married 39 years, going on 39 years. And the reality is, in order to negotiate with 5 children varying in ages from now 43 to 26, you can see the span of our raising children was most of our lives. And there comes a point that you have to understand who they are and study who they are. And it is not just about what you think the older they get. It is making space for diverse ideas to coexist and let love be the foundation that controls the atmosphere. And when you do that, when you give people the respect of learning them and studying them and being briefed about where they are in life, you can approach them more effectively and you can win, whether it's a husband, a daughter, whether it's a grandmother, and understanding that the sum total of our experiences informs the perspective through which we see life and we see issues and how we see love and how we see family and how we see each other. All of that plays into it. I think when it comes down to the family, we throw all of the negotiation skills out of the window and we start enforcing authority. And when you start enforcing authority over a free thinking person, the end result is rebellion. And so what we have to do is give everybody a place at the table where they feel heard, where they feel respected, and we never use our love as with the withdrawal of our love as a punishment for not complying with our view.
We hear that all the time on this program, and the phrases that you'll hear is somebody will say, I had a caller yesterday. She said she's talking about her sister, her adult sister, and she said, I just don't know what to do at this point, because exactly this, her sister would tell her, you should be doing this with COVID with your kids, and you should be doing this with your family, and you're doing this wrong, and blah blah blah. And she said, I don't know what to do. And I asked her a question. I said, well, let's pretend for a moment that you do know what to do, that you know that you can't allow this to continue, because the aunt was picking on the kid, really. And so I said, let's pretend for a moment you do know what's got to be done. What would that be? And she eloquently just, said what what she would say and what she would share, and it was vulnerable and connecting and all that. And I said, so that's not the real problem, is it? The real problem is you don't know what to say. The real problem is you're afraid that the relationship is going to break down. And it was the fear of, like you're saying, the withdrawal of love. So many people are walking around right now and they feel like, if I address this, and it doesn't have to be the big societal issues, it could be, their finances in the marriage. If I address this, love's going to go away.
I think one of the most important things that we can impress upon family members is unconditional love is the foundation of the growth of a thriving relationship. That I'm in it with you for the long haul. I won't run out on you because I disagree with you, your faults, your weaknesses. As long as they do not endanger life, infringe on my well-being, stop me from being able to survive, I'm going to be there. Even if I don't like your choices, that doesn't mean I don't love you. And I think when we start out with that, then we can deal with the issue without compromising the individual.
And how do you tell people in those more informal circles to practically make that happen? One of the things that I like to say is, and you alluded to this a moment ago, you said, if two nations are going to come together and have a summit, the leaders will have done their homework, right? They know the background, they know how this happened over, hundreds of years. They know what the economic forces are that are driving that other leader. They know they know all of that. And to me, where that really loads in a human relationship around the table, or in a family or a marriage or a church even, or a business, is the ability to just shut up and be curious. There's a lot of curiosity that goes into that kind of research. Well, we don't have the research interpersonally, but if we could sit at the Thanksgiving table and say, that's interesting. Tell me how you got there. Tell me how you came to think that. Tell me. And we might hear a story that actually ends up saying, where we feel like, if I had gone through that, I'd think the same way you did.
Right. If I started the book writing to preachers about how to unlock a text, and I make the assertion that it is not what you know about the text that makes you a great speaker. It's the questions you ask of the text. If we take that same premise and make it applicable to the family, it's hard to hate somebody you understand.
Boy, that's good. Say that again, Bishop. Come on.
It's
Hear
hard to
that
hate somebody you understand. I don't care what they did. I don't care how grievous their behavior might be. The better we understand each other and the backstory that goes behind producing the end result, the more tolerance, understanding, and patience we have with the person, because we realize that the only reason we don't think the way they think is that we didn't go through what they went through. So with great curiosity and fascination and genuine concern and care for you, I want to know, why do you feel the way you do? What makes you think the way that you think? And what brought you to the place that you're in, without always entering into the room as a teacher. You have a gift that few people have. You are often in the room as a teacher, but you also know how to acquiesce and become a student. And I think the best teachers are lifelong learners. And the best learners are people who listen like they're going to have to teach what they heard. So if we change places with the person and we listen like we're going to have to explain them to somebody else, rather than defending our position from an opposing perspective, and just listen as if we were going to have to explain them to somebody. And if the person who is talking will unpack their truth, but still be a student to other ideas, we could negotiate settlements in marriages.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do, what kills most marriages is that they stop talking.
That's right.
They just
And
stop talking.
a lot of times, stop talking doesn't mean silence. There's
Yeah.
still a lot of words coming out, but there's no talking yet.
No real communication, no real connection. Communication requires connection. And
Right.
we're talking at each other, we're not talking to each other, and we're not listening at the other person. In the book, I talk about the association between the ear and the mouth, that your mouth can be perfect, but if your ears start to go deaf, your speech will deteriorate.
Whoa.
That means we talk on the level we listen. And if you're going to
You
be
know,
a great...
if you ever have that thought again, you should put it in a book. That
Yeah.
that is really good. It's amazing to me how God wires the body to symbolically express lots of different things, right?
Absolutely. We are interdependent one on another.
That's right.
And the day you stop listening, your speech deteriorates to the level of your listening. And America as a whole has stopped listening.
Well,
everybody's yelling, everybody's talking, everybody's screaming. Nobody's listening. That's one of the problems. The other problem that we have is that we are not exposed to the same truth.
that's right.
So anytime we don't have the same truth, we're going to lose the circle. I forget in geometry class in junior high school, they gave you an instrument to draw a circle, and it
Compass.
was it was sharp on one end, and you put the sharp in the center, and then drew the circle around it. Our center has to be the same truth, and then our circle is complete. If we don't make that center right, the circle is going to be broken. So what is our truth? Not what is right, what is true. And once we enter into what is really true and we see that, we can hold the circle together more effectively. If the truth is, we're a nutcase family. We got a lot of issues. We're all off in some kind of way, but we really love each other. Let's start with that truth and then build a circle around it that creates a place of safe love where we can all develop together and grow toward a more perfect union. Our country needs that. Our families need that. Our marriage needs that. And all of us feel better when we're in the circle and not outside of it.
It's so powerful. Give us a couple of examples of, when you put the point down in the middle and you start at with the same truth. Give us some examples, some categories of what that might look like for people.
It may mean that we're in the middle of our lives and we didn't accomplish everything that we set out to accomplish. It may mean that we didn't reach the economic, sociological impact that we thought when we were 20 we were going to make on the world. So, and we may have come to the point that we realize that here is probably where we're going to be. Then we have to investigate if that's the truth. Then we have to draw a circle around that and look for the beauty of here and now rather than someday and there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was in Soweto. I was in Soweto and I went toured Soweto, and then I went to Alexandria in South Africa. And at that time, Alexandria still had the walls up from the apartheid and the gun towers and all of that. And we were touring by and they were driving by, and I said, stop the car, stop the car. I drove my security crazy. I stopped the car, I jumped out of the car, and I ran into Alexandria, which is highly densely concentrated, massive amount of South Africans totally Black South Africans who had just come out 7 years from the apartheid. And I started going in, and because I ran, and I don't recommend this for everybody, but I went in their houses. I talked to them about what do they eat, what does it feel like, what does it feel like to be you is a great opening line. What does it feel like to be you?
Wow.
And while I was there, I noticed something. None of the houses had floors in them. None of them had restrooms in them. All of them had dirt floors, but the floor was swept. And I thought, you take the time to sweep a dirt floor in your house, to make it as neat and nice as it is in a deplorable situation, says you have pride and care and appreciation for what you have. And though they did not have what our poor people have in America, they had a pride.
Yeah.
They had history. They knew who their ancestors were. They would proudly tell you what tribe they were and where they came from and how their people came down. And they were rich in another way. And I only bring it up to say to you, there is something beautiful about being young. And there is something beautiful about being old. And there is something beautiful about having time alone. And there is something beautiful about having time with others. If you look for it and draw a circle around it and stop denying it and accept this is where I'm at, you can turn any stage of life into a utopia by appreciating what is good about where you are.
I just want to hit rewind. It's there were so many things as you were describing that, as you know, we can all picture these situations where they don't ever get on the same page. We have all sorts of phrases like that. We're not hearing each other. We're not on the same page. You know, we don't have the same set of facts. And what you're talking about is where we got to start from. One of the thoughts I had about your point there about we've got to accept. We've both got to sit there and accept, join hands and accept, this is the truth. This is where we are. And take the example that you said. You know, we thought by now in our marriage or our business, or we thought we'd be further along. Well, we're not. This is where we are. Now, once somebody does that, something incredible happens psychologically. What they've done is they've actually gone through a little grief cycle where they've started to accept some losses. And they started to accept some losses of, I thought you were going to be different. I thought I was going to be different. And once you accept and say, but here's where we are, then you're not doing the worst part of a grief cycle, and that's the protest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get to acceptance of this is where we are, it doesn't mean we're going to stay miserable. All we're talking about here is let's just both agree we're both disappointed here. We're both hurt. We're both whatever. Then we're not going to be protesting that reality. We're going to be working with it. And that's a totally different path.
That's absolutely true. I'm smiling because I call it the death of what you had in mind.
That's good.
Yeah, the death of what you had in mind. If you can bury and memorialize what you had in mind, then you can develop an appreciation for what you have, because you can never spend what you have in mind. You can only spend what you have. And the thing about men and women is girls grow up being trained for a relationship in a way that boys are not. And so you take a 7-year-old girl, she's figured out what her wedding is going to be like, her bridal party is going to be like, and where she wants to get married. And she grows up and imagines and fantasizes. Many of them, not all of them, grow up thinking that way. Guys don't practice being husbands. You don't grow up imagining being a husband. You know, we don't give our little boys houses to play with. We give them trucks. We give them jobs. We give them work. We give them fight. We don't give them relational skills. Some girl comes along and snatches you up and says, will you? And you say, I do. But you don't really know what you're saying, I do too. And she wants you to play the role of a script she has already written.
That's right.
And you not only have not read the script, you may not have had anybody to play the role in front of you.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a huge one. So all of a sudden,
and if you think about it, if you're the director of that movie,
yeah,
and you got a casting call, if the script requires that, that's probably not the guy we're gonna put.
Exactly.
He might not quite be up to what she's asking.
He may not be up to it. And when he says I do, this is another thing. Most men say I do to their girlfriend and go home with their wife.
Yeah.
And they have fallen in love with the way we dated. So they've not fallen in love with how we live together, how we pay bills, who takes out the trash, how we settle disputes, who takes the kids to school. They fell in love with the dating you, not the married you. And so there has to be negotiations and there has to be funerals as both of us give up on what we had in mind. I thought this was going to be like dating you. You thought I was going to play this role that you've been practicing since you were 5. Both of us have to let die what we had in mind so that we can appreciate what we have. And how do we do that? Through communication. So the don't drop the mic is throughout the process to keep communicating honestly about what's going on inside of you from a balanced perspective, because I have noticed that every divorce settlement, almost every time, both people cry when they sign the papers. Yeah. Because getting out is not as fun as they thought it was going to be. And because all the while you're fighting for the divorce, all you're thinking about is what's wrong with me. But the 3, 4, 5 weeks afterwards, you're missing what was right with me. So before we get to the point of failure, let's bring what's right up beside what's wrong so that we have a true perspective of what we will or will not walk away from or stay into. And in order to do that, we have to talk honestly, not just about the complaints, the liabilities, but also, you make me laugh. You know, you really make me laugh. And even though I'm disappointed that you haven't had a job for 3 years, I love the way you make me laugh. I love the way you make me feel safe. I love the way you hold me at night. I just wish there was some kind of way that I was not left holding the entire burden of providing for this family. And it's a sandwich effect where you say something good, you put the bad news in the middle, and you end on a good note. We don't have the skills to speak. And Don't Drop the Mic is about learning the skills and the artistry of language and respecting the audience and learning how to communicate in such a way that you don't alienate somebody that you love and then cry because they're gone.
That's great. That's great. When, you know, the conversations you're talking about, when they break down to the level where people aren't listening, or you see it, I mean, in international conflicts, you know, we've both seen it in boardrooms with CEOs and directors. You've seen it in executive teams of companies. When it gets to the point, and that's generally, that's what I do. I get called into those situations. And one of the most important things that I've found in situations like that is to get it started right. Is I like to say, okay, so we're going to frame this here in you know, defining what would be a couple of outcomes we'd like to have happen. And in the first one, it may be just to really understand where each other is, really understand, where what the problem is. But excuse me, but I'm also going to set up a few ground rules. And so to frame that conversation in a few ground rules that helps guide them, even couples, how to have the conversation. Do you ever think in terms of framing it with some rules to put around it first? And I wanted to ask you, if you do, what are some of those that you use a lot?
One of them that I use a lot is that we are not going to attack the individuals, we're going to attack the issues. Because when I don't feel attacked, I respond totally different than if I feel
Right.
like you're attacking me. I would rather you attack the issue because then I have an opportunity to be on the same side with you. But if you attack the individual, I lose sight of right. And now I'm just defending myself against the onslaught of your verbalization. And this is particularly intense when one of you has more communication skills than the other, or one of you has more power or resources than the other. What you're doing is dominating me. And eventually I will rebel against it and
That's right.
uprise. And the second thing is I tell them, let each other talk without interruption. And then before you explain your perspective, I want you to explain what you heard. Because
There you go.
realize is what I said and what you heard can be that far apart. I said this, you heard that. And how do we close the gap? And most generally, we have 2 or 3 moments where they're saying, oh, no, that's not what I mean. This is what I meant. And a lot of times we don't wait to clarify what is meant before we attack what we heard. And what we heard can go all the way back to something my father said to me, or something my first boyfriend said to me, or something my date said to me, or my first
That's
teacher
right.
said to me. And it's a trigger. And when it triggers, you're not just talking to me, you're talking to your father who may be dead. You may be talking to who molested you, who abused you. And all of a sudden I get venom for something that I had nothing to do with. So making sure that you are hearing correctly rather than allowing my words to echo an experience in your life that becomes a trigger of pain. That's the second thing that I talk to. Number 3 is I will respect you. As the mother of my children, I will respect you as my partner for life. I will respect you because we procreated together. I will respect you because you're important to me. Even if I don't agree with you, I will be respectful. We have lost the ground rules on social media, in marriage, in families, on jobs. People come in on their job and kill everybody in the office. Whoa, hold up, bro. It was not that serious.
That's
They
right.
laid you off. That doesn't mean you need to come in and kill me. I just work here. Chill. We go to such extremes so quickly because we don't know how to communicate correctly. Then we react violently. And that's whether it's marriage or work or a business relationship, negotiations. And then let's talk about this for a moment. Diversity and inclusion in business is a great favor that increases the bottom line. Because
That's
if
right.
you don't add diversity and inclusion, you're going to spend twice as much money than you would on a salary on damage control, cleaning up a mistake where you insulted somebody you didn't even mean to insult, but there was nobody in that room to represent who heard. There were only people in the room who were talking about the plan. And so I think those kinds of preventative methods put in place in the workplace as well as in the relationship will save money, pain, and
Yeah.
anguish.
I totally agree that the when businesses also understand that the diversity thing, I mean, even if you could keep the culture great and nobody's getting hurt feelings or triggered or anything, even if we could do that without doing the diversity thing right, which we can't, the way that it hurts the business, because you only have one little group of people's, you only have their truth, you only have their experience, you only have their buying patterns, you only have their budgets, you only have
Right.
their tastes. And it turns into this loop of, and which is exactly what we see in the larger narrative. People basically will go to news sources and information sources that just are exactly like them. I mean,
Right.
they could have written what the people are saying. They're not learning or listening at all. And that getting, and my favorite word for this, Bishop, is proximity. What I have found in my life and in my work is I can think I can think a lot of different things until I get really, really close to it, or close to him, or close to her, or close to that situation. And when you get up close to it and you feel it and you see it and you live it and you breathe it, you're not going to have those fixed ideas that you had when you went into it.
That's right.
And we can't do that from squawk boxes
Right.
without getting some proximity.
That's right. That's exactly right.
One of the things that I say to callers all the time, they call, my mother said I should do this, my sister said I should do this, my my doctor told me I need an antidepressant, my pastor told me I should just pray and I don't need a doctor, and whatever it is. And I always say, you know, the next time somebody gives you advice, just ask this question: what did that advice cost them? If they, it doesn't cost them anything to have to go put into practice what you're saying. They don't have to live the consequences of that advice. It's cheap for them to spout their opinions because they're not even close enough to it to understand. So if you're going to take some advice, take some from somebody that you sat down and really had some proximity to what you've experienced.
Absolutely true. I think that's very, very important. And the other thing that is important too is in the process of giving advice, I always get nervous at people who give advice to people without listening at what the world looks like to them and what is the level of skills they have to be able to walk in that advice. Maybe I
There
have
you
the
go.
willpower and the strength to do that. I can take that. I can endure that. That doesn't mean that the person I'm talking to is strong enough to endure what I'm advising them to do. I'm advising them as if they had a full tank of gas, and I do. They're running off a quarter tank of gas. They don't have enough to get to Kansas.
Yeah, they
So
don't.
they may need to stop, at a rest
And
stop.
so somebody will say, well, if they wanted it bad enough, they'll do it. Well, if they were equipped, they might
Yeah,
want it way more than you want it for
right. Well, you just epitomize what's going on in this nation right now. It's not, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do better. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be able to feed their children and see themselves move up in life to a better level. If you're not doing that, it's not because you're lazy and you don't want it. It's that you don't have the equipment that is necessary because the equipment keeps changing. When I was a boy, you could work in the coal mines, you could work for Union Carbide, you could work for Monsanto, you could work for Pittsburgh Steel, and you could rival the doctor's salary working a blue collar job.
them.
Whoosh, all that is gone. Now, if you can't code, if you can't work for Google, if you can't do something in that area, the income is diminished. If you aren't a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, your potentials for making income for an entire class of people, black and white, has diminished greatly. And when I hear what we sometimes call the Rust Belt states complaining, and I hear the inner city complaining. The irony is they're complaining about the same things. They don't like each other. They won't work together, but they're mad about the same things: lack of opportunity, poor education, the influx of drugs that are coming in, whether they're prescription or otherwise. They're complaining about the same things. Nobody's listening at me. Nobody is listening. Nobody is listening. And so what we need is not only people speaking, but people listening, where we feel represented and where we feel connected, rather than to feel like the people who are supposed to represent me are so busy fighting for the score points of winning against their opponent that they have forgotten that I'm even on the field. And there I am on the field, in the position, in the huddle. They call the plays. I'm still here. The ball never touches my hand. And we feel left out. And when people feel left out, they become cynical and antagonistic. And unfortunately, they attack the people within their reach because they can't reach the people who make the choices.
No access.
Right.
And it's back to that, the proximity thing, just, it always comes back. I'll sit in meetings and I'll hear somebody, it doesn't matter which side it is, it happens both ways. And they'll describe that group, whatever that group is.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that group.
Mm-hmm.
And who they're describing and what those people are like is not even close to who they are.
Right.
But they've never had the experience of sitting down and really, really letting that story affect them from both sides. Now, you've, I was thinking about your comment a moment ago about learning and the importance of always listening and learning. A lot of the people listening to us might not know a lot about you, but if you go Google him, what you're going to find is this preacher over here has done a lot more than stand in a pulpit. You're a movie producer. How many Grammys have you won? I mean, it's just all over many fields of great accomplishment that the bishop's done. So we're talking about learning. You've sat in a lot of different situations, a lot of different industries. You've led churches. You've produced movies, as I said. You've written a lot of books. What in the last year, or even in the process of writing this book, what did you learn? What did you learn about you? What lights came
I
on?
learned that it's easier to talk about a subject than to talk about yourself.
like kind of right now in this moment?
Yeah. Talking about yourself really brings it to a place of introspection that's interesting. I had a talk show. I own several for-profit companies. The for-profit companies are older than the Potter's House. So I've always been involved as an entrepreneur. I've always owned my own businesses. Way back to when I was in school, I always worked every day of my life, and I've always been multifaceted. When people meet you as a preacher, they put you in a category depending on whatever they think that is. Yeah. And they do it at the expense of robbing you of being a person. So you're a preacher making movies. No, I'm a person making movies. I'm a person that makes movies, and I get paid like every other person who makes movies. And I just did 2 projects for Lifetime, 7 Deadly Sins, Lust and Envy, that aired on the Lifetime Network. I've done Faith Under Fire with them. I've produced 8 different movies that have gone to screen. I've been on the New York Times list about 12 or 13 times. What I'm saying is, those experiences caused me to sit at the table far outside of the faith community, learning and listening and developing. And I have to often tell myself, not get frustrated at people who think the way they think. We all think whatever we think on the level that we are exposed to. And so we're judging. I often give the analogy between the turtle and the giraffe. They can occupy the same geographical space. And the giraffe will be talking about what it looks like from here. And the turtle will say, that's absolutely crazy. All I see is grass. And neither one of them are lying. They're just reporting from their perspective. And I often have to realize that people report from their perspective because that is as high as they can see. And what a privilege it is to grow your neck beyond where your feet dwell so that you can see a more panoramic view of the world around you. Whatever it is, the Bible says your gift will bring you before great men. If that happens in your life and you're gifted, even if it's at mopping the floor, that you end up in a position where you're mopping the floor at Buckingham Palace, you're going to be exposed to something that you were not exposed to before that causes you to think differently from somebody who cleans up the barbershop.
I don't even know what to say. I mean, well, Jesus said that about the eyes. He said, the eye is the lamp of the body.
Right.
And if your eye is good, then the body's going to be full of light. And if it's not, and it's interesting. You probably know this, but I learned something about that passage in the last few years that I never had known. But the Greek word there for when it says if your eye is good, if your eye is clear, that word actually means generous. And the passage says if we're looking at the world from a generous perspective, how can I love? How can I help? How can I engage? Like you're saying, doesn't matter if it's in the barbershop or wherever it is, but how can I be generous and loving and open and inclusive and understanding and empathic and all of that in these moments? That light, we're going to get so much more light that's going to come, and it's going to take us to higher levels of solving problems where there are disputes or breakdowns, like you were saying a moment ago. And I was just thinking about how so much of what we talked about in listening to one another and then speaking from the mic, it's when I'm across the table in a conflict, what kind of eyes am I looking with? Do I have generous eyes? Am I going to give them the attention, the moment, and the respect to truly try to understand that story, to understand what it's like down there in the grass as a turtle, or to understand from the giraffe? No wonder you don't understand. You live out there, and that takes a generous approach before we pick up the mic and just start to yell at somebody.
That is so true. Let me mention something that I think is equally as fascinating. The Gospel of St. John is the only text that mentions it. None of the other gospel writers mention it. On the last night that Jesus spent with his disciples, that would be the most important night to say your final last words before you go to the cross. He instead ate with them. And supper being ended, he stood and stripped and girded himself with a towel. Great leadership requires that you strip and be transparent and say, this is who I am. And then he wrapped himself in a towel. This is the last memory that is indelibly placed upon their mind, that the master they had been following dropped down on his knees and started washing feet. And I think he's saying that the highest calling is service. And if we would think before we said the next word, how does this serve anybody? How does it serve to make the world better? I think that barometer changes what would and would not be selected to be said. I did a lot of study. I just come back from Nairobi, and I done all of this study about the ancestry and about the seedbed of human life spawning out of the continent and all the languages that erupted and Tower of Babel and all that. I had all this stuff, and I was getting ready to speak about it. And I had it all written down, and I looked at it and thought, what does this matter to the people that are coming? It's really fascinating to you, and it's greatly interesting, but what does this matter to the single mother who's got 3 kids that's coming, or the exasperated football player who's coming to the end of his contract, or the person who's in the middle of owning a business that's shaking because of COVID? I could not see how the message served anybody, and I never preached it.
Yeah.
If what you do doesn't serve the greater good of someone else, you should leave it in the drawer. And yeah, because the people that go down in history, whether it's Abraham Lincoln, whether it's Dr. Martin Luther King, whether it's Nelson Mandela, whether it's Helen Keller, it doesn't matter who it is that goes down in the annals of history in some way. What they did served humanity in some way. Those are the people who have the longest lasting effect. The only exception being those who denigrated humanity, Hitler, so forth, so on, to the degree that they became infamous. But the people that became famous down through history, they weren't always acknowledged in their lifetime. But Mother Teresa, they spent their life serving people. Out of all of the people who served as nuns, Mother Teresa's life stood up because she was known for serving people. And so when I say don't drop the mic, it's not about being arrogant. It's not about being superior. It's about how can you serve people. Dr. King was shot to death at 39 years old, never saw his 40th birthday. But the 39 years he accomplished more than others that lived to be 80, 90, or 100. How do you make your life mean something? I'm 64 years old, and meaning is everything to me now. As I grow older, I'm not old, but as I grow older, I'm starting to recognize all that matters is all that matters. That's all that matters. It's what really matters. And if you don't live your life for what matters, then you're just taking up space that somebody in the hospital is gasping for. They're gasping for, with all of the problems, the people that are listening to us right now, with all the problems you have and what's going on in your marriage and what's going on with your children, what's going on with your sister, and your Aunt Mabel hadn't come to Thanksgiving dinner for 5 years. There is somebody in the hospital who would trade with you in a heartbeat, who can't catch their breath.
That's right.
And you're not counting the breath as a blessing. You're not counting the fact that you're not hurting as a blessing. You don't appreciate it till you lose it. But everything doesn't have to be perfect for you to have an amazing life just because you can breathe and think, and nobody had to set you up today, and nobody had to wash you, and nobody had to clean your mouth out. You have so much to say, and there's somebody who will listen to everybody that's listening at us. And all I'm saying to you is don't let the distractions of the disruptions of life make you drop your mic and stop being productive and lifting up somebody, even if it's just one person, delivering a message of hope and encouragement. Might be calling somebody in a nursing home and sending them cookies. I don't care how large or small it is. Don't be a derelict of your responsibilities to keep communication, to keep caring, and to keep reaching out to others.
What a great word. I was going to ask you, because we're coming up against the clock, and I was going to ask you, what do you want to leave them with, the parting shot? And I think you just did it.
Yeah.
I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking, everybody's got a mic.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a mic, and some are on platforms, and some are sitting in a neighborhood, and there's a widow down the street who, you know, hardly ever sees her family. They're obviously maybe across the country, or she needs some company. You got a mic by going and knocking on her door and say, you know what, we've been neighbors for however long, and I've never had a chance to really get to know you. Tell me your story. That's a mic, right? And that doesn't
Correct.
take a platform. And that changes life, the meaning of life.
Every Thanksgiving and Christmas, we normally end up feeding 40 or 50 people. And it's not because my family is that big, though I have a big family. It is also that every kid who can't go home for the holidays, every person who lost a mother they used to go home with, we invite them all over to our house for dinner, and we bring them into our family, and we have an experience together that's wonderful. We break bread, we laugh, we talk, we reminisce. Sometimes people start crying. It's ministry. Love is ministry.
That's right.
It's not about power. Love will heal almost anything. Uh,
Anything.
I really do hope that as you and I wax older, that we understand that success is predicated on a successor, and that we reach and raise up others, and in so doing, the legacy of what we built continues to be built upon, standing on the shoulders of the accomplishments that we leave behind.
The whole thing is a ripple effect to pass it all on, right? Whatever good anybody does, it's if it ends right there, then it's over. But
Right,
love doesn't end. It just you see this as a psychologist. I can tell you, you see a kid, they're thriving in school, they're happy. There's a result. Well, somebody's loving that kid.
right,
Somebody's supporting that kid.
right,
Somebody's disciplining that kid. And so I always talk about, we're like a boat going across the ocean, Bishop. I always say that, every boat you're going across the ocean, you can stand on the aft end of that boat and turn around and look where you've been. And that boat's going to leave a wake.
right,
It's going to leave a wake behind it on two sides. One side is what did we get done? Where did we move the needle a little bit, and whatever it was, using our gifts and talents, the results we got in whatever we put our hand to the plow. And on the other side of that wake is the people that we encountered while we were doing it. And are they better off because we passed through their lives, no matter how long or how small that was? And I think that's a large part of the meaning that you're talking about. That every day, I think, if we can, if you look at Thanksgiving dinner and say, what kind of wake did I leave? Even in these small conversations, did I move the needle? Did I advance things, or did I get mad and blow it up and set us back 2 more years? Because we
right.
always leave a wake. So I really have enjoyed your taking the time to come visit with us. How can people get your book?
Don't Drop the Mic is wherever books are sold. You can go into Target and find it. You can go into Books A Million, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere you buy, Amazon. It can be delivered to your door. You can go out and get it. It's your preference. Also available on audio as well. And I hope my goal is not so much about selling a lot of books, but stirring up a lot of people's gifts and conscious
There you
to
go.
rethink how we use communication.
The power is in the tongue, right?
That's right. Exactly.
There you go. Well, Bishop, really, really appreciate it. Hope to you'll do another Zoom in flyby sometime, because
I'd
I
love
got
to.
I got a whole one of the things I want to talk to you about, we didn't have time today, was I love your concept of, or the way you put it, that you're not a preacher, you're not a movie producer, you're not a author, you're a person that does a bunch of different stuff, right?
Right.
And and one of the things that I'd love to hear sometime, I want you to promise me you'll come back, is is how do people sitting there and they know they've got this little desire, they got this little talent, they got this fantasy, but they're burying it in the ground because they think, well, I'm not this, or I'm not that, or I'm not a producer, I'm not. And I'm going to have you back, and I want to ask you about your story of so many different careers, keeping them
Yes.
alive over so many years, because I think some people can learn from that.
I
So,
would
so you
love
got
to
to
do that.
promise me to come back.
I promise you I will. I would love to do that.
All righty. Well, thank you for joining us, and to everybody else, we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be back on our let me make sure we got the time that's going to be yeah, it'll be our regular time at 10 Pacific, but sits on the web 24/7, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all those places. You can get it as a podcast. Share this one so the Bishop's Wisdom can get out there with your friends and family. Maybe some of those conversations that have broken down, maybe you could use this and sit down and invite your sister, your aunt, your husband, your wife, whoever, and say, I heard some stuff here that might help us. Why don't we listen to it together and see where we're not doing what we just heard? Invite them to do that. See what happens. And don't forget, the marriage webinar is coming up May 19th, right here, 2 hours, you and me, talking about how we do better in marriage, whether it's falling off a cliff or you're floating along doing well and want to do better. Go to boundaries.me/marriage to sign up for that. And everybody else, go to boundaries.me and check it out. We've got over 80 courses on there now. We're putting up new ones all the time about all these areas of life, and love to see you join us. So that's it. Bishop, thank you again. And
That's great.
we'll see everybody tomorrow. God bless.
God
Bye-bye.
bless you all. Thank you.